Cellular respiration, the things autotrophs and heterotrophs do, by Miss Hoskins. In this video, you are going to learn how to analyze structure and function between cells and provide an explanation for the role that cellular respiration plays in the cycling of matter and the flow of energy within a cell. After glycolysis, the cell must make a decision. If oxygen is present, then the cell will go through a two-step process known as aerobic respiration, where it's going to use oxygen. Or if oxygen is not present, then the cell is going to go through a process of anaerobic respiration. We also call that fermentation in order to get energy. So in glycolysis, if there's oxygen, O2 gas, it's going to go into an aerobic process, and if there is none, it's going to become an anaerobic process, also known as fermentation. All right, so when oxygen is available, aerobic respiration occurs. Now, we call this the citric acid cycle. I used to call it the Krebs cycle because I'm old, but apparently now it's called the citric acid cycle. But its main function is to make electron carriers. Remember that NADH and also FADH2. And that basically, these guys are going to move to the electron transport chain. All of this is going to happen in the mitochondrial matrix. So if this is a mitochondria and it has a membrane, the matrix is this like jelly-like fluid that's in between, the outer part here and the matrix wall. And this process, it's 8 steps. And it's a lot of chemical reactions. So it's 8 steps of chemical reactions where 2 of those pyruvate molecules from glycolysis are chemically converted to make 2 ATP and some NADH and also this FADH2. This whole process releases carbon dioxide as a waste product, byproduct of aerobic respiration. All right, so the citric acid cycle, or the Krebs cycle for us old people, pyruvate from glycolysis is converted into acetyl-CoA, and then it's going to enter that citric acid cycle where NAD and FAD, they act as an electron carrier and they will become NADH. So see, we're going to add a hydrogen there and we're going to add 2 hydrogens to this guy, and those are going to carry electrons into that final step. The cycle happens twice, and each time one of these pyruvate molecules, is going to create and make 4 NADH, 1 ATP, 1 FADH2, and 3 carbon dioxide molecules. Therefore, that is a sum total of 8 NADH molecules, 2 ATPs, 2 of the newly added FADH2, and 6 carbon dioxide molecules that are made through the process of aerobic respiration, also known as the citric acid cycle, aka, for us old people, the Krebs cycle. Now, if oxygen is available in aerobic respiration, the second step is going to be this electron transport chain. That's an oxidative phosphorylation and chemiosmosis process. All right, remember that chemiosmosis, it combines with the electron transport chain to ATP synthesize. And the location is in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. The location where the oxidative phosphorylation and chemiosmosis process of the electron transport chain, this is a huge mouthful, takes place is in the mitochondria inner membrane. So inside the little squiggly part, if you ever want to know what that thing does, That's pronounced Krista, and that's what's happening inside of their aerobic respiration. So let's take a closer look at this. All right, if I were to take a piece of the membrane right here and blow it up, it's going to look like this. Over here is the jelly-like matrix, and inside of that inner membrane is illustrated right here. Okay, so aerobic respiration, this oxidative phosphorylation, is taking place right here at the cusp of where the membrane and the matrix meet. And essentially what is happening is that this membrane again has proteins in it, these protein channels. Some of them are pumps, some of them are channels that facilitate diffusion. And over here we have hydrogens, right? So there's lots of hydrogens, these H plus molecules, there are protons inside of that inner membrane space. And so these hydrogens will come out of the protein channels, and a DP, which is inside of the matrix, the jelly-like fluid, will interact with those hydrogens, and once again, picking up that hydrogen, we become ATP, tri, because we were ADP, di. So we're going to pick up that hydrogen and, of course, that phosphate group and use that to make ATP. Now the citric acid cycle is going to spit out NADH, and there are protein channels that are going to rip off that hydrogen and pump it into the inner membrane space, leaving NAD. This new one that we learned, FADH2, so there's two hydrogens there, and that's all a product of the citric acid cycle, and that's going to interact with another protein complex where it's going to rip off those two hydrogens. And remember, we're moving a proton, and every time we move a proton, we are breaking bonds or creating bonds, releasing or absorbing energy. Okay, and then we have water. And so anytime there's oxygen and it interacts with hydrogen, we get the formation of water through another protein channel process. But the citric acid cycle, the big idea here is the citric acid cycle is contributing to the mitochondrial aerobic respiration, this NADH and FADH2. So let's think about this, because we've talked a lot about photosynthesis and now you're talking about cellular respiration. So photosynthesis has carbon dioxide and water as its reactants, and cellular respiration uses them as products. Cellular respiration, its product, will put out an ATP. This reaction is endothermic, and cellular respiration is exothermic. Exothermic here meaning that it's going to give off heat, all right? And endothermic process in which heat is being absorbed through that process, and so in an endothermic process, the reaction is going to feel cooler than its surroundings, and in an exothermic, it's going to be hotter than its overall surroundings. So not only the reactants different, but the products as well, because photosynthesis is going to produce sugar, glucose, and oxygen, and cellular respiration is going to produce water and carbon dioxide. The first step with these guys is also very different. In photosynthesis, we have its first step being the electron transport chain, and that occurs in the grana, which is those stacks of thalcaloid, green little pancake-looking things, and that is in the chloroplast. And we use water, we split water, and we make oxygen. And the cellular respiration, its first major step is in the Krebs cycle. And that occurs in the mitochondrial matrix. That's the fluid in between the membrane part, where we're going to use glucose as a pyruvate after glycolysis. So remember, we have to split glucose in half, and then we're going to make carbon dioxide. So this cellular respiration makes carbon dioxide, and photosynthesis makes water. The second step for these guys is the Calvin cycle over here and the electron transport chain over here, which these two things also occur in different locations. The Calvin cycle occurs in the stroma, which is the fluid in between all of those stroma and those alkaloid plates. And step 2 of cellular respiration is going to occur inside the inner membrane of the mitochondria.